Continue your nosh. Thank you for being here for the second panel of the day, third panel of the day, second session of the day of Puppet Modernism with Matthew Issac Cohen moderating.
Thank you very much, John. If people want to take their seats. And there will be some food in the back, and you're welcome to get the food during the course of the afternoon to keep up your energy and spirits. So this is the third session of today's program. As John said, my name is Matthew Cohen. I know most of you already, but for those of you I don't know, I'm a professor here in the Department of Dramatic Arts, and I teach on the puppetry program at both the undergraduate and graduate level. I'm also this year a 2025 Guggenheim Fellow in Theater and Performance Studies. There's Guggenheim. And so I have the great privilege of being able to, UConn has granted me the year to work on a book about puppetry. So I'm very happy to be able to have that time and space to do that work. Today's, this panel is titled Puppet Modernism. And it's a panel which features presentations by Didier Plassard and Colette Searls, drawing on John Bell's scholarship in American Puppet Modernism, a 2008 publication from Routledge, as both an inspiration and a point of critical comparison. The discussant will be Delice Amato from Boston University. And many of you are very familiar with this book on American Puppet Modernism. Less familiar to some of you, perhaps, will be John's 1993 PhD thesis entitled Mechanical Ballets, the rediscovery of performing objects on European stages, which is from 1993. And that book also develops a theory about the place of not only puppets, but also masks and other kinds of performing objects within the European modern avant-garde. It's a wonderful and imaginative PhD, which draws unlikely connections between the world of ballet and theater and the visual arts and design, which I could heartily recommend still after these years to everyone who might be interested, not only in American puppet modernism, but also in the European. Some of you will also not be aware, but one of the two courses which John established for our MFA students in puppet arts is the title is Puppet Modernism. So it's been also something which has been present not only in John's scholarship, but also in his teaching here at the University of Connecticut. It's a course which I've taken up since John's retirement. So there's another legacy there as well. But I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Didier Plassard, who is a full professor of drama and performance studies at Université Paul Valéry Montpellier 3 in France, pardon my French. Didier's research focuses on avant-garde theater, dramaturgy, multimedia, and puppetry. His major publications include L'acteur en effigie, Les Mains de Lumière, and Edward Gordon Craig, The Drama for Fools, which is a collection of puppet plays written by Edward Gordon Craig, very, very little known until Didier's monumental bilingual publication of the plays from a manuscript, which is in Charleville-Mézières. And more recently, a book called Mise en scène de Le Mans. He has served as editor-in-chief of Prospero European Review, has been a guest editor for the journal Puck, and has also edited a volume for Art Press too. He received the Prix Georges Amati, Cyrano d'Oro, and was named Chevalier des Arts et des Lettres by the French Ministry of Culture, which is one of the highest honors which can be bestowed on a French academic or artist. And that came from the French Ministry of Culture. He has been the principal investigator of puppet plays, a European Research Council funded project exploring puppet theater texts from 2019 to 2025. And not on the bio, although definitely worth noting, is a major publication which has just come out, open access publication on European puppet plays. And it's a splendid value. It's an extraordinary contribution to our understanding of various kinds of puppet texts, those written as aid memoirs by puppeteers, those published for reading pleasure and for the enactment of home entertainments, and texts starting with the work of Jarry by poets and literary figures of note. And it's one of the, if it's not in your PDF collection of PDFs, it should be. But I'll turn things over now to Didier, who will be delivering a paper entitled Facing the Puppet, a Memento Vitae.
Thank you. I will share my PowerPoint presentation. Oh, thank you, Matthew, for this kind presentation, and thank you also, John, Min, and Matthew, for your kind invitation. Trying to reduce it. Wow. Well, this presentation will take the form of a short meditation that was inspired by a sentence I read in John Bell's book, American Puppet Modernism. Playing with the dead world is ultimately what object performance is about, and the fundamental juxtaposition of living and dead provokes a continually charged situation. So the aim of this paper is to explore one of the many ways in which this fundamental juxtaposition of living and the dead is used in contemporary puppet theater, and what kind of charged situations it provokes. I would like to call this specific way a memento vitae, that is to say, a reminder of life. I will first clarify how I came to this expression, then I will examine some examples of performances that could be interpreted as such. Memento mori, meaning remember that you will die, or more precisely, that you are in the process of dying, is the classical Latin phrase that serves as a reminder of the brevity of human existence and the futility of material success. The idea originated with Greek and Roman Stoic philosophers before becoming a famous topos of Christian thought and iconography, as seen in the numerous depictions of dancing skeletons in late medieval danse macabre scenes, then in the vanitas of Dutch painters of the 16th and 17th centuries, featuring ephemeral goods alongside the skull. As Friedrich Nietzsche observed, the modern era, in response to the memento mori, promoted another motto, memento vivere, vivere. This began with Goethe. In Goethe's novel Wilhelm Meister's apprenticeship, where the protagonist reads the inscription Gedenke zu leben, think of living, on a funeral monument, an invitation that his English translator Thomas Carlyle considered as the secret of Goethe's whole poetic alchemy. The motto was then used by Ralph Waldo Emerson in his journal, while Théophile Gautier had it in Latin, Memento vivere, engraved on his personal seal, and the poetess Louise Siffert called it the law of life. Puppets, of course, can illustrate both of these pieces of advice, which have become such commonplace mottos that searching internet will immediately show you offers to have them together tattooed on your body or printed on a t-shirt. Yet I prefer to focus on another variation, Memento Vitae, remember life, which I suggest to understand as remember that dead people once were alive. Not an individual piece of advice, a modern carpe diem, but a reminder of deceased people as living bodies. Here lies the expressive potential of puppetry that I would like to examine, considering the puppet not as an object that behaves like a living being, but as an image of a dead person brought back to life. Many researchers have underlined the importance of the theme of death in modernist and 20th century theater aesthetics, and more specifically in the renewal of puppetry as an art form. Beginning with Alfred Jarry's comparison between the impassiveness of a puppet, that of a mask, and that of the skeleton, it goes on with Maurice Maeterlinck's suggestion of replacing actors by wax figures because they seem to be dead people speaking to us, thereby august voices. And it culminates with Edward Gordon Craig's dream of the Uber marionette and its death-like beauty. Some decades and 2 world wars later, Tadeusz Kantor, in his manifesto The Theatre of Death, considerably reinforced the importance of the imagery of death as a source of inspiration for contemporary theatre and performance. Kantor's manifesto had also a very strong impact on puppeteers, as we could verify through the conference Sur marionnettes et mannequins held in Charleville-Mézières in 2012. Whether through the silence and the immobility of figures, the choice of life-size mannequins, or the imagery of skulls, bones, and skeletons, contemporary puppetry maintains a constant dialogue with the aesthetics of death in their most macabre appearances. But let us take a leap into the world of traditional puppeteers. Playing with death is one of the oldest themes in street glove puppet repertoires, whether that of Pulcinella, Polichinelle, Jan Klassen, or Casper. In most cases, these scenes are variations upon 2 or 3 possibilities. The first one, of course, is a fight between the hero and death, who is portrayed as a character. This scene always ends with a victory of the hero, while when fighting against the devil, he was sometimes defeated and brought to hell as a punishment for his misbehaving. But more interesting, in my perspective, are the classical scenes where a character pretends to be dead and then comes by to fight against his adversary, or when a dead character appears to be still alive. One of these scenarios is that we could call of a reluctant corpse. The hero has killed his enemy, the guapo in the Neapolitan tradition of the Guaratelli, and tries to put him into a coffin, but the corpse always falls outside of it or is too long to be laid into it. Successfully placing the corpse in the coffin without it sticking out in a way for the hero is a way for the hero to get rid of his enemy a second time, to kill him again, as we can see in Gaspare Nazzuto's performance of his famous trick, but this one that have sound problems. I didn't download the good version of Zoom, sorry. Another scenario is that of a disappearing corpse. Death comes as a character and hides the corpse so that the hero believes it has gone on its own initiative. This serves as a prelude to the fight between the hero and death. Traditional glove puppet street performances, with their multiple fights, simulated deaths, and disobedient corpses, are indeed the primitive nucleus around which the popular idea that puppets never die arose. All these events are but the dramatization of a simple fact of animating a puppet, bringing it from stillness to movement, and suggesting thereby alternating images of life and death. The illusion of life can be continued into the illusion of death. Therefore, the idea of resurrection is strongly connected to the dramaturgy of puppet theater. It needs only to reanimate an object. This idea of resurrection plays an important part in the performances of the bread and puppet theater, whose gigantic summer events from 1974 till 1998 were called Our Domestic Resurrection Circus. In this context, resurrection was intended, I hope that John Bell will correct me if I am wrong, as a general rebirth, the transformation of all participants, performers, and audience into a new collective and stronger body with an increased knowledge and political conscience. But the annual domestic resurrection circuses included also a pageant section featuring, to quote Scott Strout, a procession of multi-operator giant puppet, usually culminating with the immolation and resurrection of one prominent giant puppet figure. Some of his pageants assumed a clear cathartic function, with a giant puppet portraying a victim of political violence. In 1984, the pageant was entitled Crucifixion and Resurrection of Archbishop Romero of El Salvador, remembering the murder of Oscar Romero, assassinated while celebrating Mass 4 years before, because he preached against the civil war in Salvador. In 1989, another pageant was called The Same Boat, The Passion of Chico Mendes. Mendes was a Brazilian trade union leader and environmentalist, advocating for rights of the peasants and the indigenous people living in the Amazon rainforest, also assassinated. In both cases, resurrection takes a more specific meaning, closer to its religious origin. It becomes a mourning ceremony and a promise that the action of the deceased will remain as a living example for the community. Another example of staging of resurrection in the bread and puppet theater history is a 1967 performance, Dead Man Rises, where a woman discovers a dead man in a river, breaks him to a house, lays him on a boat, on a bed, and awakens him. The extreme slowness of the movements, the narrator whispered voice, the black cocaine assisting the actors, and the tinkling of a bell transform the performance into a fascinating ritual. I'm sure you know perfectly this video, so I won't show it to you. I'm sorry. The French playwright, painter, and stage director Valère Novarina made also use of a giant puppet to perform a resurrection ritual in his play L'Acte Inconnu, The Unknown Act, which premiered in 2007 at the Festival d'Avignon. This scene, an iconic example of Memento Vitae, in my opinion, was a tribute to the late actor Daniel Znik, who was a famous member of Novarina's troupe and had passed away a few months earlier. It made use of a mask which had been molded on the actor's face for the performances of L'Espace Furieux, the Furious Space, at the Comédie Française, where Znik had to comically jump upon his own head and break it into pieces. The actors of L'Acte Inconnu fixed a copy of this mask at the end of a long stick, and with two other sticks moving the hands of this huge rod puppet, made this effigy of Znik stand up and dance to the music of an accordion as a resurrection, of course, and also a demonstration of protest against death. Death to the deaf was a slogan of L'Acte Inconnu. Puppets can also act as memento vitae when making use of ghosts, another key character for the traditional repertoires of street glove puppeteers. In performances of the Punch and Judy show, where Judy, after being killed by her husband, should reappear as a ghost, the scene was sometimes cancelled. It is not included in John Payne Collier's edition of 1828, but it appears in the paper-nose wooden sconces version of 1854. The anonymous puppeteer interviewed by Henry Mayo explains that when performing in family homes, these sentimental audiences ask him not to play the scenes involving the ghost, the coffin, and the devil. The reason he gives for this demand, the march of the intellect, may be interpreted as the desire of the middle and upper classes families to break free from superstition, which was stigmatized as typical of uneducated lower class audiences. Michael Byram's suggestion that the ghost in the Punch and Judy show could be an English addition to the continental, mostly Italian and French canvas for glove puppets is very plausible, but the lack of documentation makes it impossible to verify. Nevertheless, the Portuguese tradition of Dom Roberto, the first documented reference to which dates back only to the 1940s, includes a play entitled O Castelo dos Fantasmas, The Castle of Ghosts, in which the hero fights against a ghost, a devil, a crocodile, and a giant. In the plays written for Guignol, in the plays written for Guignol in Lyon, you can also find some ghosts, but they are usually fake ones. Guignol disguises himself as a ghost to frighten an avaricious lady in Le Revenant. or a group of counterfeiters spread rumors that the underground passages of a castle are haunted by ghosts in order to scare off anyone who might discover their illegal activities in les souterrains du vieux château. And ghosts, of course, appear in many marionette theater performances of the 19th century in Germany and in Italy, melodramas, adaptations of Shakespeare's tragedies, etc. All of these ghosts are not what I consider as images of Memento Vitae. They don't portray dead people as they were during their lives, but just make use of a classical imagery of haunting figures covered with a shroud. On the other hand, modern times ghosts, as imagined by puppet theater, can be considered as such memento vitae, because they are made with some parts of a former being. This is what, for example, so, sorry. Yes. This is what, in a certain way, imagined the Czech teenager Janusz Harkenburg in his play We Need a Ghost, written as he was a 13 years old boy in the concentration camp of Terezin before he was deported and assassinated in Auschwitz-Birkenau in 1944. In Harkenburg's grotesque farce, a king orders the collection of all the bones of elderly people in his realm. Using these bones, he will build a huge ghost to frighten the population and let them think exactly as he does. All families are forced to hand over their members over the age of 60 so that they will be killed and their bones used for building the ghost. The play ends in a circus with the king and death quarreling over their respective guiltiness. Ghost-like figures can be also recognized in many performances of a bread and puppet theater. In the anti-war demonstration of the 60s and 70s, for example, the women of Vietnam, all covered with a white sheet, bear a white mask with closed eyes that rigidifies their faces and make them appear as already dead people. Purchased by the airplanes, they seem to come back to life in order to go through the moment in which they were killed over and over again. This is another example of what I call memento vitae. Although they are portrayed as ghosts, these masked figures remind us that they have been living women. They are threshold figure standing in an intermediary space between images of life and images of death. In Gisèle Vienn's adaptation of Jerk, a short story by Dennis Cooper, the actor Jonathan Capdevielle manipulates some teddy bears, symbolizing the serial killer Dean Cole and his accomplices as they were torturing and killing their victims in form of a human-like puppet. Jonathan Capdevielle plays the part of the only survivor of the serial killer group, David Owen Brooks, who pretended he was just filming the murders and was then sentenced for lifetime imprisonment. In Dennis Cooper's fiction, Brooks, after many years, takes part in an academic lecture on psychology and tells the story of Dean Cole of the Houston mass murders affair with the help of his dummies. He explains how Dean Cole manipulated the corpses as they were puppets and engaged an imaginary dialogue with them. All this dialogue is performed by Cap de Viel, who, an extraordinary ventriloquist, uses sometimes three different voices without moving his lips. The puppet becomes an image of a dead victim brought back to an illusory life by his torturer and murderer, himself another puppet. Characters on the threshold between life and death can also be represented by parts of their body, as if the rest of them had already disappeared. This can be seen, for example, in Elise Vigneron. This I can show you. There is little music, but it's not interesting. The movement itself is really interesting. In Elise Vigneron's shows Impermanence, with the slow entering of several pairs of feet, molded in ice, which begin to melt when placed upon a hot metal plate. In another show, The Other Side of the Garden, by a Syrian Kun theater group under the direction of Hossama Halal, the character of a woman is performed by an actress who holds her head with her hand. The show is a rewriting of Hans Christian Andersen's tale, The Story of a Mother. This mother follows in the footsteps of death, who took her little child away. She goes through several encounters that cause her to lose her youth, her hair, and her eyesight, then meets death, but is unable to take her son back to her. An allegory in Osama's Halal interpretation and rewriting of the sufferings endured by the people in Syria, left without any notice of their missing parents. This head of a mother, deprived of her body, appears as a striking image of human beings left helpless, partly dead, reduced to their anxious questioning, without any hands, would I like to say. Undead people on the puppet stage can also be represented by their absence, if replaced by other beings.
Didier, can we ask you to sum up? We're almost out of time.
Yes, I go to my conclusion.
Thank you.
This is it. Yes. Among these many possibilities of representing dead people through puppetry, to the point that only non-human characters, as in Réseau Gabriel's, can be left to suggest the loss of human beings, I would like to conclude this paper by underlining the expressive potentials of puppets, which can, through their visual quality, give a form to the Memento Vitae, the remembering of dead people as living beings. This was, for example, in a film of Ritipan about the Cambodian dictatorship, but I just remain on this last image of the film. I wanted to underline the fact that these figurines are not exactly puppets, because They all remain absolutely still, as if they had been embalmed by the memory. They are roughly carved with a knife in little bricks of clay, and their faces bear many little scars and microscopic holes, as if they were almost living dead people. Similar impression of half-dead people uh, uh, results in the show Camp by the theater group Hotel Moderne of the Netherlands, from the heads of thousands of figurines portraying the deportees in Auschwitz-Birkenau. My last example will be taken from a play by the French author Jean Cagnard, Les Gens Légers Light People, which has been staged by the company Archetal. This is also the evocation of a genocide committed by the Nazis, but through allegoric and poetic images, as seen by a little girl. This little girl is inquisitive, constantly asking questions of the imaginary people she encounters. She encounters such as a man who is in charge of shrinking the sky, and a character named Petit tas de cendres, small pile of ashes, steadily growing during the play. How can this character, small pile of ashes, be represented on stage? This is a problem Greta Bruggemann, who made the puppets, had to resolve. She decided to give to this character the form of a branch of people, adults and children, not already transformed into ashes, but reduced to a single aspect, wearing the same faces and the same bag of burlap for their bodies. And they could be tied together as an illustration of a common fate. Greta Bruggemann wanted to uh, give shape to ashes in order to give voice to the departed, in quotation. This could also be a definition of puppet theater working as a memento vitae, a memory prop that makes us look at dead people as if they were still on the threshold between life and death, and to remember that before they died, they used to be living beings. Thank you for your attention, and please excuse me.
Thank you so much, Didier. We'll go on immediately to our next speaker, who is Colette Searls. Colette is professor of theater at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and is an award-winning director and author who has received grants from the Jim Henson Foundation, Maryland State Arts Council, and Puppeteers of America for her original work in found object puppetry. Her book, A Galaxy of Things, The Power of Puppets and Masks in Star Wars and Beyond, which she actually discussed in the same space in one of our puppet forums some time ago. Very popular forum filled with Star Wars fans. And this book received the 2024 Nancy Staub Award. Searls has served on the Unima USA board and is currently the performance review editor for Puppetry International Research. Over to you, Colette.
All right, so thanks everyone for your patience. With that, I promise to be efficient. So thank you so much for having me. I cannot tell you how much I wish I could be there. It really hurts me to see so many people on the screen that I love, and I love this community. And John, thank you for this occasion. And Min, thank you for the invitation. And Emily, thank you for all the support in making this happen. What I'm going to talk about today is robots, and I'm going to come from John Bell's American Puppet Modernism on this. This is the influence that John has had on my work is immeasurable. I have been fangirling him since the 2000s. Before I met him, he was like a big star to me. But the real, the kind of the springboard for me was American Puppet Modernism. So I thought I'd take a picture of the book because it's hilarious how much I have cited him and like engaged with marginalia and flags. The part of his book I'll be talking about today is this section of chapter 9, which you'll see up there on the screen. I hope you can see it. The title for this section is Chapter 9, Performing Objects, Special Effects, and Mass Media, is the name of the chapter, sorry. But the name of this section title is Performing Objects and ... the most popular films of all time, 3 exclamation points. So John reminds us of what's hiding in plain sight, that puppets, masks, performing objects, and even CGI animations, which he adds to the list, they are essential to the most popular, recognizable, and money-generating film franchises of all time. Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Pirates of the Caribbean, and of course, Star Wars. So he points to how they didn't get the credit that they deserved in spite of their ubiquity and popularity, and this is part of what inspired me to write this book. So in the book, A Galaxy of Things, The Power of Puppets, Masks, and Puppets and Masks in Star Wars and Beyond, I had sort of two major goals here. One is elevating the profile of characters like Yoda, Chewbacca, C-3PO, and what they brought to films like Star Wars, and in a way that what they brought that human characters could not. And I also wanted to use these famously recognizable characters as case studies to demonstrate how material characters on stage or screen wield their particular powers that human characters do not have. All right, so advancing to the next slide. So here's a definition of this collection, what I call material characters. It's a family of characters that includes masks and digital figures, performing objects, all different kinds of puppets. I don't try to suggest that these differentiations aren't important. Obviously, a mask is very different than a shadow puppet versus a body puppet. But I think that there's something to be gained by giving them all a family name and collecting them together. I got this term essentially from the term material performance, which, of course, Dacia Posner coined in the book, The Routledge Companion to Puppetry and Material Performance. But I started using it as a noun. I started kind of thinking about these as a collection in talks that I was giving. And I found that if I collected them together, they started to show the powers that they had. There's really just one power I want to talk about today, and that's what I call the duality of absent presence. That is a material character's ability to both obscure and convey the human performer that is bringing them to life. So they're both conveying and obscuring that performer in some way. And you can see examples in this slide of different ways that the human being is either present or hidden, but they're always present in some way, even in the sort of modernist performances that they do in films like Star Wars, where they're trying to be realistic and trying to be like real aliens, et cetera, as opposed to a Muppet that might comment on itself. But I'm focusing on this collaborative aspect because I think it's important to the conversation about robots, which I will circle back to in a moment. But just to give you a sense of the framework, I call the duality of absent presence as one of 5 dualities that I talk about in the book. And then duality is in turn one of 3 major umbrella powers that I get into. That's in chapter 2 if you'd like to have a look, but I'd like to go ahead and for the sake of time and move on to robots. This is where my research is sitting right now. So when I say I was like fangirling John and other puppetry scholars, this set me off on a journey of looking at all different kinds of digital puppets and characters of all different kinds. But right now, it's been a year out from writing the book. I'm really getting interested in what I talked about in chapter 5, which is a special type of material character, the robot character. And in Star Wars, of course, they're called droids. But you see them all over popular culture, and you see some in theater as well. Here on the left, you have Tarish Jiggetto-Pipkin's performance of Spinocchio. That's his son, Tarish Pipkins, performing the title character, which is a robot named Spinocchio. You can look at that. It's on the cover of Puppetry International magazine, coming out any day now. And then you have Alex and Olmsted from here in Baltimore. Shout out to Baltimore. They are performing their internationally acclaimed production of Marooned, which features a puppet robot there as well. But in film, you see the absent presence, that duality of absent presence often requires complete concealing of the human, and yet they're still there. And what I think is so amazing about puppet characters is that they're things pretending to be things that are pretending to be alive, right? That's what a robot does. It's pretending to be alive. So there's this double performance that's happening with robots that makes them so interesting. But what I examine in my book, and I want to examine even further now, is this common role that they've played since the beginning of robot time, which is the role of a servant. I talk about this. I'm teaching a seminar right now. I teach a seminar series on my book at the Honors College at UMBC, and my students, I ask them to look for this, and I say, do you see this common thread? That's that they're all playing some kind of subhuman servant to the human beings. That seems to be a role that they're stuck in. But this came from the very beginning of robots. Now, some of you may know this already. This is talked about a lot. But robots came from theater. That was a term that was coined for the play RUR, Rossum's Universal Robots. So I'm going to cite chapter 5. I'm just going to read from my book here a little bit, paraphrasing. The concept of robot is rooted in performance because it comes from a play. Science Friday producer Christopher Intagliata offers this helpful illumination of the term's history. As a word robot, it's a newcomer to the English language. It was the brainchild of Karel Čapek, who introduced it in his 1920 hit play RUR, or Rossum's Universal Robots. Robot is drawn from the Old Church Slavonic word robota for servitude, forced labor, or drudgery. So as you can see, the very idea of the robot was already from its conception. It came from the idea of service and free labor and drudgery. But the sort of the idea of an artificial human was also really what kind of took off and became exciting. If the word viral was a thing back then, it wasn't, but this would have been what we would have called it. It went absolutely viral. This play was translated all over the world. And what was so interesting is that when it was translated, the word robot was not. They kept the word robot as every other word in the play was translated. And this term has become, regular in our vernacular now. But part of what as it influenced further types of fictional characters in science fiction, that service aspect really did stick. And it really stuck particularly, in Star Wars. Now, of course, there was so much science fiction robot servitude going on before Star Wars, but it really kind of cemented it in a big way. The droids in Star Wars come to us literally on like a slave ship and are sold to the main character, the hero, Luke Skywalker, at a slave auction, essentially, or a sale. And C-3PO as the sort of head droid, he really promotes and ensures forwards this type of service. He makes R2-D2 follow the rules and obey his masters. So he's an upholder of this, which is going to come into play in what I'm about to get to. Because here's the thing, C-3PO specifically is a big model for contemporary, like current robot design. What you see on the screen here are two images of domestic robots that are being promoted right now. About a year ago, Elon Musk was quoted promoting his new Tesla bot, Optimus, on the left, as a Star Wars droid in real life. He was declaring at multiple conferences and conventions that, of course, everyone wants their own C-3PO, right? This is a new C-3PO. You can have your own C-3PO. That's his thing, his shtick, what he's saying. On the right is a similar competing droid, a servant bot called Neo Gamma by 1X Robotics, which they have been rolling out in recent TED Talks and advertisements. And on their website, which this is an image from, on their website, Neo is promoted to bring, quote, warmth and personality to your home, unquote, as a domestic servant inspired by Rosie the Robot Maid from the Jetsons cartoon. So we see here the clear lineage between the fictional performance of a humanoid servant and a real-world attempt to provide that performance at home as the real deal. My early research into this indicates real blind spots to the performance and service aspects of the humanoid robot. This blind spot can be harmful, I think, because performance is powerful. So consider this, Neo is meant to be performing a mechanical human, with, as the marketing promises, warmth and personality. So let's say you own this Neo, so you buy them, right? You buy them on Amazon or whatever, you have them shipped, you open up the Neo, you get him started, and you ask him to vacuum for you, which is one of the 3 or 4 things he can do right now, right? So he vacuums your rug, and then you're like, all right, you're finished, go park yourself in the closet when you're done. When you do that, you are performing the role of a person who owns another person, who owns a subhuman, who exists just for your bidding, who has no life other than to give you what you want and do what you want it to do. And you're doing this in your home, in front of your kids, in a very intimate space. So I think there's a no-brainer that that's not good for humanity, to create something that is asking us to perform as a slave owner, essentially. But I also think this blind spot also misses what's most compelling about fictional robots that they are modeling. What's compelling about C-3PO is not what he can do. It's not that, I don't think he does any vacuuming or chores. He's mainly a translator, right? He actually doesn't do a lot. What's compelling about him are his characterization and his relationships, which we see not only in C-3PO himself, but also his predecessor, the more recent droid, K2SO. So K2SO, just briefly, for those of you who aren't big Star Wars fans, you might not know who this is, but K2SO is the more contemporary C-3PO. C-3PO is still around. He's still in a lot of live action films and television and so on. But K2SO was premiered in 2016 in the film Rogue One. And he's now in the current series, Andor, which is branched off from this. There's been a 2 series of live action television shows on Disney Plus called Andor. And it's won a lot of awards. It's very critically acclaimed, very popular. And this droid is like, well, let me describe C-3PO first, and then let me contrast them a little bit. You know, I think what made C-3PO one of the most popular characters ever of all time was not what he did in terms of labor, but how he makes us feel when we watch him. We love to watch Star Wars droids because they make us laugh at their characterizations. They're silly, they're goofy, and we like to watch how they muck around with humans. C-3PO was always talking too much, pestering Han Solo about facts that Han Solo doesn't want to hear. And one of my favorite scenes is when in Empire Strikes Back, Han Solo's having this like moment with Princess Leia. They finally have their kiss, and right then C-3PO enters with characteristic cluelessness and completely blows up the whole thing, having no idea what he's done wrong because he doesn't understand human behavior. It's a hilarious moment and it's endearing. K2SO has come along. He is not exactly like C-3PO. He's similarly intelligent, but he's more of a blaster-proof oddball with the brains of a computer and the body of a giant. His brutal honesty brings comic relief to the most serious military operations in this otherwise rather serious, story about war, which is what Andor and Rogue One were. And of course, much of this is in the writing, right? If you have good writing, if you write good jokes, if you write good interactions and characters, you're going to get a good story. But that's part of my point, that these are stories. This is not your living room. This is not your kitchen. This is a fictional story. And this is why we find robots interesting, is because they're well written in these relationships and personalities. But let's not forget the performer. And this is what brings me back to the duality of absent presence. We have here 2 actors that are behind this, right? That are literally inside it. Anthony Daniels has been performing C-3PO since the 1970s. And when he first donned that suit, he had to negotiate with its rigidity, with its elbows, with its walk. And he created a character based in some ways on that rigidity. He's actually a very, very rigid character, kind of, symbolically as well as literally. And he created this kind of a fussy butler archetype in collaboration with that suit. And he's there with Harrison Ford and the late Carrie Fisher performing in comic timing that he knows from his training, right? And he's acting with them as an actor in real time. K2SO is interesting. He's not in the suit. He's in what I call a suit of the imagination. He's in a performance capture suit, very well aware of the image that the artists and the animators have created. He knows this image. He's collaborating with it. He's an expert comic actor. He's actually he's got a title role in Resident Alien right now. I think it's on Netflix or Prime or whatever it is. But he's an expert in performing kind of like alien oddball characters, and he's engaging with the image, and he's engaging with his scene partner, who is played there right next to him, Cassian Andor. Played by Diego Luna. He's got punchlines. He's got funny comic timing, head turns at just the right time. It's just like theater in a sense. They're able to perform these robots in a theatrical space, and that is what makes them so compelling. And that is what I think today's robot designers do not seem to understand. So I'm going to conclude with a happy note here. This is just some joyful images. And this is something that I think that John really brings forward in his writing, actually, with all those exclamation points and ellipses, that performance of material characters is tremendously joyful, that even when it's serious and political and lyrical, there's always the opportunity for joy. And in popular culture, in mass media material characters that I'm talking about right now, they bring enough joy that people in their spare time will go out and try to remake these droids. And this isn't for a job. This is like for hobby. People will go out and try to become these characters by building K2SO. K2SO is one of the most popular characters to try to figure out in cosplay conventions and maker conventions and parades and so on. And here you see somebody who's built the character as a puppet, as a suit character, and is now out there on the street playing with a regular guy playing, Cassian Andor, walking down the street. To the right, you see a life-size replica of BB-8, which is a droid from the new sequel films. I saw this figure at Dragon Con, and it's really real. It's really real. And there's a puppeteer behind it. And the one that I saw was Cy Delice, who I've included there down on the right. She's a sort of a robot hobbyist maker, and she and her buddies there created this BB-8, and they perform it at cosplay conventions. So she's back there puppeteering it and interacting with little kids like this, and it's so delightful. It just brings such delight. So to me, I'm going to just conclude by saying this reminds me of what John writes about on page 5 of American Puppet Modernism, and that's the performance triad, where the spectators and the performer are coming together with this object. It brings them together. And that bringing together is something that I think robots in the real world just can't quite do, because there's no human to human. There's not that human connection that I think makes us so interested in them. So I will leave it there. This world of play. Let me leave us in the world of play, because I think it's such a beautiful place, and I think it honors John. So there we have it. These are my sources. If you are interested in learning more, I included a couple of QRs there for the book. I also gave a talk on this a lot longer than what I just did now about robots and in fiction and reality on a podcast. If you're into podcasts, there you go. And there's my email. Please send me if you have any references for anything on this topic. I'm going to be spending the next year in this world, so I'd love to hear any thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Colette. We're going to steal a little bit of time from the next section, but I wanted just to give some time for Felice to sum up and put some propositions on the table. I won't read Felice's whole biography, but Delice Amato is an assistant professor in the Department of Art Education at Boston University. And for those of you who are watching for puppet books, we have a book launch later today, and this is a very good moment for puppet books. We have a monograph expected from Felice entitled Women, Puppets, Mass, and the Body, which is under contract by Routledge. So I'll let you comment. We'll have a little bit of time for questions, and then I'll try to do a summing up of the 3 sessions we've had.
Great. Well, first of all, I want to say I'm really honored to be here today and to get to participate in the celebration of John. I've benefited from his generosity as a mentor, academic, in innumerable ways. So thank you, John. Thank you so much, Colette and Didier. Those were fascinating presentations, and I have this scribble of all these different ideas, and I'll try to come up with some prompts here that both of you can respond to as I look at the audience, and then also try to look back at you. So one of the things that John brings forward in the book on modernism is this specific sort of embrace of technology and mechanisms, and that was kind of part of American Puppet Modernism. And I'm wondering if each of you would kind of speak to how you see that represented in representations of death, or how that's kind of specific to kind of the presentation of robots and robot adjacent things in puppetry.
Do you want to go first, DJ? Or do you want me to jump in?
Why not unmute?
Okay, so, all right, yeah, sure.
Oh, Didier is speaking, but muted.
Oh, sorry, he's speaking, but he's muted. Didier, you're
Didier,
muted?
can you unmute?
Could you please repeat your question?
Yes. So one of the things that John brings forward in American Puppet Modernism is like a specific embrace of technology and mechanisms that was characteristic. So each of you, can you comment on how you see that showing up in your particular kind of discussion that you offered today?
Well, first of all, I must say that I don't know. I'm not a specialist of American theater history, so I believe John. But in Europe, there were many stagings, for example, of R.U.R., the play by Karel Čapek, in France, in England. An English firma made a little toy in form of a puppet, in form of a robot, and above all, I would say that the imagination of a robot was built out of European images of a futurist in Italy and a constructivist in Russia, automaton. I mean that there were many in the 20s, many mechanical dance or mechanical dances, which really gave a first images of metallic men. If you have a look at the first images, the first photographs of performances of Karel Čapek's play, they are only actors with sometimes a mask, but rigidified with a uniform, but they are not this metallic aspect that comes really from the avant-garde. This I would like first to say. And then I think that, well, there is also a long history of robots on stage, and this specifically has to be examined on stage and also on in other kind of events on fairs, for example. Well, what I saw, what I think above all, because there are many robots, real robots on stage now, since 10 or 20 years, but usually these robots are used only as automata. I mean, they have no possibility to react to the environment. So they are just repeating a series of gestures that have been programmed. Yes, there is the imagination of a robot. There is a mental image that we have of a robot, but on stage it's really very difficult. If I can just add a little example, I think of a performance in France that used really a robot, but it was limited in his capacity. And one evening, the performance decided to let the robot use his artificial intelligence and so on to react to improvise in theater. It's in theater 10. The first line that said the robot was, "I had bad actors." It was a bit difficult for the other actors on stage. So robots on stage, real robots on stage, are a bit like animals in principle.
That's fascinating. Wow, thank you. I'll just say briefly, to your question, about mechanisms, I think that I don't want to give the impression that I don't respect. I think that these engineers, I haven't interviewed them yet. That's sort of a next layer. But the impression I'm getting is that there's a joy that goes into building them, right? It's not just about making money. I think it's like I think it's playing with stuff, which is what which is the name of, I think, chapter 1 in the book here. I'm just looking at it here. It says playing with stuff. Playing with the material world is something that John has really talks about a lot here. And I think that when a lot of it is just for the sake of inventing. I mean, my son has just started engineering school, and I've watched him grow up and how much he loves to just the challenge of like how to make something and how to make human simulacra is really, it's like the golden challenge, right? And I think that it's also a Frankenstein impulse there, and I'm interested in that. So that encouragement of playing with the material world is something that all material characters generate, but I think robots in particular are something sort of extra there. And I thank you for those examples, Didier. I'm interested a little bit in puppets on stage, but I've never seen any so far that were interesting. And that interests me too. It's like, what's actually compelling on stage? What is actually compelling and what is not? Is there a question there in the comments? So go ahead.
Do we have any questions from the audience here? Yes, Doctor.
I have a question for Colette. I was thinking about, in context of what you were saying about robot servants. I have lots of thoughts about, like in a Soviet context about the idea that machines were going to free humans from slavery, et cetera. And it was really interesting what you were saying about how you have these robot caregivers in your house, and that's sort of like, again, reinscribing the idea of the human brain serving in your house. But what do you think of like Alexa and Siri, which have literally become invisible? They're just these disembodied voices that, again, follow the video.
Could you hear that,
Yes,
Colette?
I did. Thank you, Dacia. And it's so great to have you in this conversation together. I wish I was there. Because I owe so much to you as well in this research. The caregiving one is big, right? This is already happening. There are already caregiving little robots going on. And what I feel like it's doing, in a way, it's freeing, as a caregiver myself, it's freeing people up from the sort of drudgery of care. And I mainly in like when it comes to elder care and hospital care, it's sort of subcontracting the human nurse person or daughter or son or sister, and it's kind of replacing that. And that's a bit terrifying because that's hard labor. It's hard labor, and it is freeing of women. I mean, I think of the feminist aspect of that, where it's like that is women's labor a lot of times. And so, and this was, part of advertising in the 50s is like, oh, you'll be liberated at home, and you can dress up and like, have free time to do your hair because you have this vacuum cleaner now and this magical wash machine that's going to free up women's labor. And it doesn't do it at all. It's a false promise. But there's an intersection between labor and robotics that I think is really, it's really worth examining. I mean, I really want to kind of collaborate with somebody who studies labor, a sociologist who studies labor. I think that would be really, really interesting because we're using robotic technological labor right now as I speak to you, right? Zoom labor, like the labor of Zoom, and there are AIs figuring this out for us right now. And I use it to get from point A to B when I drive, the labor of looking at a map and so on. But when it becomes personal stuff, when it becomes the love and caregiving and conversation, and you start to replace the things that make us human, I'm hoping that we will continue to rebel against it, that we'll have the attitude people had towards the prequels in Star Wars, like, oh, I hate the CGI. I miss the person. I miss the practical puppets, and I miss Frank Oz. I'm seeing a little bit of that anecdotally in everyday life, where people are like, to heck with a Zoom call, let's meet up in person. I'm seeing that as a professor. I'm seeing my students really love in-person assignments and in-person group projects and things like that. So I don't know, Dacia, I'm going off on a tangent a bit, but we're still in that phase of like thinking out loud about it, if that makes sense. Did I answer your question?
I think we're out of time right now. We have on the chat a footnote from Frank Proshen, who notes that Peter Bogatyrev ran in the same circles as Karl Čapek did in 1920s Prague, so that there's calls it intertwining of theorization of puppetry with robots. And we also have a question from Amy Valentine about robot puppet deaths, which would bring together our two presentations. But the chat will be recorded, so you'll be able to think about those kinds of questions and comments later. I want to thank very much our two presenters, Colette and Didier, for these fascinating presentations, and also to Felice for moderating, for commenting as discussant.
Thanks to you both. Thanks, everybody. I'll stick around. I'll write in the comments.
I just want to use a couple of minutes. We will have a short break before the next session, which is a book launch of Making Meaning in Puppetry. But just to say a few things which will maybe bring together or not these different facets of the career of John Bell. And I should say in the call for papers, we had other facets which were not represented today. John is very, very well known for his work on political performance. And today is No King's Day, appropriately. We're not on the streets, but I think it is important to recognize the power of puppetry, not only to deal with questions of life and death, or the reminders to live or reminders to die, the robots in between, but also the power of puppetry to challenge authority, to speak for people who can't speak, to destabilize regimes, and to renew communities and establish new communities which didn't exist before. And these are all things which are on the streets at this current moment and part of our lives, but have been very much an important part of John's work, not only as a scholar, but also as an activist. And here I'm thinking of not only the puppet work, which he's done with Great Small Works and Bread and Puppet, but also the work with Honk, which is very much about reclaiming the streets and establishing new or emergent communities. But the material we have covered today, it has been extremely broad and I think really, really interesting. Going back to this question of field formation, which Kati dealt with in her presentation about how her work in Finland has been really enabled by the presence of a discourse in puppetry, and Min's reference to the Green Book, which has been an essential reference to so many. There it is, the Green Book, as well as the 1999 TDR special issue, which was later published as an independent volume, and John's own two solo books, both American Puppet Modernism, which has been mentioned already, but also I think as well his book, which is based around the Detroit collection, which is I think an equally important contribution to the field. So this question of discourse formation and of the formation of an academic field has been very much at the center of a lot of our discussions today. And I remember John's talking about how when he was applying for Columbia to do a PhD, and how the professors there and his prospective supervisors were very suspicious about the idea that one could do a PhD on puppetry, because they said there weren't the scholarly references which would allow you to do your qualifying exams. There wasn't a body of literature which existed. I think that there might have been some validity to those comments in the late 1980s, but not today, I think. And we have not only a book launch, but other books which have been recently published, or as in Felicia's case, about to be published, which have really done a lot of work establishing an English language, very rigorous, seriously theorized, to use Frank Proshen's term, field of study. And we've seen how looking at the puppet enables us to think not only about puppetry in a theatrical setting, but also in a wide range of performances and of forms of visual culture and questions about life and death, which can be examined through the lens of the puppet, sometimes as a metaphor, sometimes as a comparator, sometimes as a companion. The puppet operates in these many different kinds of registers. I think, symptomatic of this expanse of the field has been this discussion of this in the museum panel today. And I was really pleased to see the depth of that kind of discourse, thinking about museum practices, which can, I would suggest, be relevant not only to be thinking about puppets in museums, but the puppet museum maybe is emblematic of a new way of imagining the museum as a space for not only contemplation and of discussion, but also of interaction and play, and how the puppet museum then might be a model for many other kinds of museums which aspire to be more than just places where pictures are hung and where artifacts of the past are, which are no longer working, are on display. These puppets we see in the museum here, and it's one of the delights of going to openings, are puppets which had a life, and many of them will have a life again. So the puppet museum is often only a way station on towards another thing. And those of you who have been on opening nights of exhibits, I've had the rare pleasure of seeing John manipulate many of the objects on display, which would be unthinkable in many other museums. But here's kind of the norm, that John pluck a string or will lift up a mask, or even do a little playlet with the objects on display. And that's, I think, is a wonderful thing to see, right? That the museum then becomes a space for subversion and a space for other kinds of communications, giving a sense that all of the serious things which we carry around with us have also another function, which is enabling different kinds of communication. So I thought the museum panel was so enlightening, and I'm very much for the idea of a special issue of PIR. We've had volumes about puppets in museums, and one was already referenced here, which Nancy Staub was involved with. But I think there's a need for at this moment to think about museums in a different way, which is not only repositories of collections, which the American Puppetry volume was mostly about, what objects are where, but museums as spaces of interaction, of life, of communication. And I think we saw that in all three of the exhibiting puppets panel. I was very taken with Paulette's presentation of Mules and Men, especially the way she described how she went about making this. And this, again, this kind of playfulness that the barrel of monkeys, the barrel was reused as taken out of the function of being a game or a piece of play into a representation of torture. And the Barbie, or the princess, the Disney princess car, which takes on a new life as a symbol of class when it's brought into the film and used to splash, to abuse one of the characters in the films. And that sense of doubleness, of play, I think really gets at an important side of puppetry, which was referenced in today's panel as being a memento of life. I think we're reaching new moments in this discourse around puppetry. There's a shared sense of critical references, of artists, of theories, which go back to the Green Book and also to a special issue of Semiotica, edited by Frank Proshen and some other landmark publications, that we're seeing work which is circulating internationally, And I think the internet has been greatly important for that. We're seeing and if you look at earlier books on puppetry by people like Bill Baird, the closest we would get to these classic productions, which are indexed in those books, would be one black and white image. But today, through the internet, we're seeing puppetry as a performing art, as an art in motion. And so we're able to talk, I think, at a much more deeper level about the art form as one not only built on images and on static objects, but also something which is brought to life in front of audiences. And I think we saw that in today's presentations where performing groups were referenced and productions were referenced, which we share knowledge of, and we're able to understand at a much deeper level than in the past because of that. I'd like just to say it's been a great pleasure, finally, in my last moment, to be able to work with John Bell here at the University of Connecticut. John has brought a degree of rigor to the Ballard Museum and make it into a center for research, for performance, for teaching, for outreach. He's also developed a roster of courses in the department, not only the graduate courses, which I mentioned earlier, but also an introduction to world puppetry, which has been very successful in getting out the good word about the value of puppetry to people around the university. And I'd just like to say that we hope that you'll continue to be present as an elder, John, that you won't disappear. And we look forward to following whatever comes next in your career. Thank you.